The twin moons of Kirel 5 hung in the sky like quiet watchers. Casting pale light on the royal camp, Princess Sorella walked among her people with her chin held high, her long silver robes brushing the ground. She was the daughter of the supreme matriarch of the Zyran Empire, one of the most powerful empires in the Endora system. Her skin glowed faint blue, her eyes sharp like glass, her voice full of pride. Behind her walked a human, silent and unnoticed. His name was Rain. He wore simple, dark armor with no medals or marks, just the crest of the Empire's protection unit. To Sorella, he was just another bodyguard. One of those creatures the Empire hired from the dying Earth. She often forgot he was even there, and when she did notice, it was only to sigh or shake her head, human. She said one evening as she sipped spiced wine near the fire, "Your silence is as empty as your use." The alien nobles around her laughed. Rain said nothing. He simply stood in the shadows, hands folded, eyes scanning the forest beyond the camp. "Tell me," she continued mockingly, "what do you even do? Humans used to be great ones, they say. Brave fighters, clever minds. But now, you're like walking furniture." Still, Rain stayed quiet. He didn't look at her, didn't flinch. He had heard worse. He had lived through worse. That night, Sorella returned to her private tent, comforted by warm light, soft music, and silk sheets. Outside, Rain stood at his post, as always. His mind was sharp, trained, constantly scanning patterns of sound and shadow. And tonight, something was wrong. A faint whir in the wind, a pulse of static, too artificial to be natural. Rain didn't wait. He tapped his comlink perimeter. "Breach, Sector 3, no reply," then chaos. A sharp blast ripped through the outer shield line, sending guards flying. Shadowy figures stormed through the smoke, firing plasma rounds in all directions. Screams echoed, lights flickered. The nobles scattered like birds. Untrained and terrified, Rain moved like lightning. He rushed through burning debris, leaped over fallen soldiers. He found Sorella frozen in shock, a blade pointed at her by one of the attackers. She looked too stunned to scream. Rain didn't think. He tackled the attacker without slowing down. Slamming into him like a comet, they both hit the ground hard. Rain rolled, grabbed the enemy's weapon and fired once clean. The attacker dropped, gone. Sorella stared at him, wide-eyed. You, she whispered. Rain didn't answer. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into cover. Plasma bolts zipped past them. He shielded her with his body as he returned fire. Precise and controlled. One by one, more attackers fell. The other guards were disorganized. Most had fled. Rain was fighting alone, protecting the princess with no backup, no command. When the smoke finally cleared, the camp was destroyed. Half of her retinue were missing or dead. Rain was bleeding from two places, but still standing. He looked at her once, just once, to check if she was all right. Sorella had no words. Her lips trembled, not from fear, but confusion. This human, this creature she had mocked only hours ago, had just saved her life. Without hesitation, without question, without waiting for thanks, he turned away to check the outer perimeter. The firelight behind him revealed his torn armor, the burns on his back, yet he still stood straight, like a soldier, like someone trained to suffer in silence. "Wait," she said suddenly, her voice soft. He paused. Looking over his shoulder, Sorella swallowed hard. Why would you do that? Even after what I said?" Rain's voice was calm, quiet. "I don't need your kindness," he said. "Just your safety." Then he walked back into the burning forest to check for survivors. Sorella remained standing, frozen in place for the first time in her life. She felt small, and for the first time, she wondered maybe humans weren't useless. Maybe this one wasn't like the stories. Maybe He was more than she ever understood. Asterix smoke still hung in the air as the sun rose over the ruined camp. Ashes drifted like black snow, and the once beautiful Zyran banners were torn and burned. Sorella walked slowly among the wreckage. Her royal robes dirtied with blood and dust. Her silver crown was gone, her pride shaken. She looked around for Rain. He was nowhere in sight. She felt a strange pull inside her chest, not anger, but something. Close to worry, the same human she called useless had thrown himself into fire to save her. Now he had vanished into it, and she didn't even know if he was alive. Suddenly, a voice crackled on the broken camp. "Come, perimeter holding." Clearing the north path, minimal resistance. It was Rain. He was still out there, still fighting, still cleaning up, alone. Sorella found him near the outer hills, crouched behind a fallen tree. His hands were stained red. A deep cut above his brow, slowly bleeding down his face. He was holding a small Zyran child, the daughter of a noble who had died in the attack. Rain wrapped the child in his jacket and handed her to a medic. No words, no emotion, just silent duty. Sorella approached, uncertain. Rain looked up briefly, his eyes tired but focused. "You're awake?" he said simply. "Good." "You should be resting," she said, trying not to sound soft. "I'll rest when it's safe," he replied, then turned to check a scanner. Sorella crossed her arms, trying to look composed, but her voice betrayed her. "Why do you act like this isn't madness? You're just a bodyguard, not a soldier." Rain glanced at her, then spoke slowly. "I was a soldier." He turned the scanner toward her, showed heat signatures in the forest, 7 hostiles. "Moving fast," he said, loading his weapon. "They're not done with us. What do we do?" she asked. "We hold them," he answered. "You'll stay here. I'll draw them away." She grabbed his arm, surprising herself. "You'll die." Rain paused, looking at her hand on his arm, then calmly said, "Better me than you." He walked out into the trees, disappearing like a shadow. Sorella watched him go, heart pounding. Why was this human so willing to sacrifice himself? Why? Did he act like her life was worth more than his? Minutes passed like hours. The distant sounds of gunfire echoed through the forest. Then silence. Then something exploded. Trees shook, birds fled, and fire erupted in the distance. Sorella ran toward the sound, past frightened soldiers and wrecked landers. She found Rain on one knee, breathing hard. Smoke rising from his armor. 5 enemy soldiers lay dead around him, but Rain wasn't moving. "Rain?" she shouted, dropping beside him. He opened one eye, coughing still. "Not dead," he muttered with a small smirk. Sorella helped him up, struggling to lift his weight. He leaned on her without protest. It was strange, seeing him vulnerable. Stranger still feeling proud of him. "You took them all on, by yourself?" she asked, amazed. "They weren't trained, just hired guns," he said. "But you were trained, weren't you?" she whispered. Rain looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I was part of Ghost Corps. Earth's final special unit before our fall," he said quietly. "We did missions no one else could." Sorella stared at him in disbelief. Ghost Corps was a name whispered in war stories. Ghosts who fought without being seen, who survived. "Impossible odds. Why are you here then?" "Guarding me like a servant," she asked softly. Rain's answer came like a blade. "Because Earth lost," he said. "And now we're useful only as servants. Unless we prove otherwise." Her heart twisted. She had mocked him, called him useless, but he had more honor than anyone in her court. He had risked everything, not for glory, but because it was right. They reached a small shelter, where medics patched Rain's wounds. Sorella sat beside him, unusually silent. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked. He didn't look at her, just said, "Would you have listened?" She had no answer. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of regret. respect. And something new she didn't fully understand. As the sun set, Rain rested for the first time. Sorella stood watch now, and she kept her eyes on the shadows, because this time she was the one protecting him. The crash site was still burning when the cold arrived. Not just wind, but a deep, sharp cold that slid under the skin like a knife. The twin moons vanished behind clouds, and the forest turned black. Even the trees stopped whispering, "Princess." Sorella stood beside the flickering campfire. Her arms wrapped around herself, her robes were scorched. Her hair tied back with a strip of fabric torn from her own sleeve. Across the small clearing, Rain sat against a rock. Silent and pale. His face was bruised, and the bandage on his chest was already soaked red again. The medics had fled during the second wave of attacks. Now it was just her and the human, alone in the dead zone of the planet. The coms were down, back up days away. And temperatures dropping fast. Sorella had never experienced cold like this. Zyran cities where climate controlled this kind of suffering was alien to her. She shivered violently, teeth chattering, her royal pride breaking with each breath. And still, Rain sat quiet, refusing to rest inside the shelter pod. "Get inside," she snapped, annoyed at both the cold and his stubbornness. He shook his head. "You take it, I'm not asking," she said through clenched teeth. "I wasn't either," he replied, voice hoarse but calm. She stormed to the pod and stopped. It was small, meant for one person. A basic survival capsule with emergency heat, oxygen, and a thermal blanket. She looked back at Rain. He was trying to relight the fire with shaking hands and broken tech. The sparks fizzled. The twigs stayed cold. "You'll freeze," she muttered. Walking toward him, he didn't answer. Just tried again. Sparks, smoke. Nothing. Sorella knelt beside him, grabbing the lighter from his hands. "Move," she said. Together, they tried again. Her hands touched his by mistake. His skin was like ice, stars above. She whispered, finally understanding how bad it was. She worked fast now, pressing the heat disk closer, shielding it from the wind. This time, the twigs caught flame. A tiny fire was born. Struggling in the wind like a weak heartbeat, Rain exhaled. Slowly, like the warmth gave him a piece of life back. Sorella sat beside him, watching the flames grow. Neither spoke for a long time. "Why didn't you tell them?" she finally asked. "About Ghost Core? About Earth?" Rain stared into the fire. "No one cares what Earth was," he said quietly. "Only what it became. But it matters," she said. "You mattered." He smiled weakly. "Not to them. To me," she whispered. Not even sure why she said it. Rain blinked, surprised, but said nothing. The fire popped softly between them. "Tell me," she said after a while, "what happened?" "To Earth." Rain sighed. "We were proud once," he said. "We built cities in the sky. Fought wars no one else dared fight, but too many wars. Too many enemies. And no allies. We lost our home and our place." His voice was flat, not bitter, like it was just a story now. "A few of us survived," he continued. "Ghost Corps was disbanded. We were sold as security, miners, test pilots. We became tools." Sorella listened in silence. Her chest ached in a way she didn't understand. She had always been told humans were lucky to serve. But now, sitting beside this man, this quiet warrior, she felt ashamed. "I used to think you were beneath us," she admitted. Rain didn't reply. "But you saved me, again and again," she said, voice soft. "I don't deserve that." Still, he said nothing. The wind howled. Louder now. The cold biting Sorella shivered again, even near the fire. Rain looked at her, then slowly took the thermal blanket from his own pack. He placed it around her shoulders, ignoring her protest. "You need it more," he said. "Your body's not built for this." She looked at him, stunned. "You'll die. Better cold than regret, he said, with a faint smirk. She stared at him a long moment, then crawled closer. Then share it, she said. Pulling the blanket across both their shoulders, Rain didn't move, didn't object, just nodded once. They sat side by side, wrapped in one blanket, the fire, flickering low to beings from different worlds, one called useless, the other raised to rule. But that night, under the frozen sky, they were just two souls trying to survive, and slowly, something warmer than fire began to grow between them. The forest slept uneasily. Even the wind had fallen quiet. Only the crackling of the small fire and the low hum of the shelter pod filled the silence. Rain sat awake, eyes half open, his muscles aching, his side still burned where the cut had reopened, but he didn't mention it. Sorella was asleep beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. He didn't dare move. She had stopped shivering at last. And for once, her face looked calm. The stars above blinked behind fast-moving clouds. Rain's instincts screamed something was off. He scanned the dark tree line ahead. Then he heard it just for a moment, a faint crunch of leaves, too heavy for a falling branch, too soft for a patrol drone. Rain slowly reached for his rifle. Eyes locked on the woods, another crunch closer. Then a strange sound, wet, clicking. Like bones scraping together, he stood, placing Sorella gently against the side of the pod. In the shadows, something moved, tall, crawling, wrong. Its body shimmered like oil in moonlight to many legs. No visible eyes, a deep green glow pulsed from under its skin. Rain took aim and fired. A sharp crack of plasma lit the clearing. The creature screeched, spinning wildly. Its legs folded inward, and it vanished into the dark. Sorella jerked awake, eyes wide. What was that? Rain didn't answer immediately. He knelt down, feeling the ground. Hunters, he said at last, not soldiers. Beasts, maybe genetically altered. Not natural. She stood, clutching the blanket around her. Are we being hunted? Rain gave her a look, serious, steady. We always were. Suddenly, a loud screech tore through the trees, then another and another, closer now. The fire dimmed as if the air itself was holding its breath. Rain dropped the rest of the thermal fuel into the flames. It blazed up, casting stronger light. Don't run, he told her. They sensed movement. Sorella grabbed a pulse pistol from the pod's emergency kit. Her hands shook, but she didn't back down. What do I do? She asked, breath shallow. Rain tossed her a signal flare. If they come close, flash this in their face. Sight'll blind them for a few seconds. What about you? I'll be their problem, he said, stepping into the dark. The creatures circled the clearing, invisible in the undergrowth. But Rain knew how to hunt hunters. He moved silently, placing makeshift traps, wire lines, energy spikes, sound mines, all built from scrap in less than 10 minutes. One beast lunged too early and hit a trap. The explosion sent it flying through the air, its black shell cracking on impact. The others paused. Now more cautious, Rain returned to the fire. Breathing hard. They're testing us, he said. Smart. Too smart for wild things. Sorella looked pale, sweat running down her brow. Why would someone send monsters after us? Rain didn't answer right away, then said, because they're afraid of what happens if we survive. Suddenly, 3 of the creatures rushed at once. Ka! Rain shot the first in the head, but the second leaped over the fire, claws out. Sorella screamed and fired her pistol blindly. The bolt hit the creature in the chest, and it stumbled back. Shrieking, Rain tackled it mid-air, stabbing it with a shard of metal. It screamed once more and went still. The third creature rushed Sorella. She dropped the flare, and it lit up right under the beast's face. It recoiled, blind and howling. Rain shot it through the neck. Silence returned. Only heavy breathing remained. Sorella stood frozen, the pistol slipping from her hand. Rain caught her before she fell. "You did good," he whispered, lowering her to the ground. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. I've never killed before." Rain nodded slowly. "Then it means you're still human." In your own way, she looked up at him, voice trembling. "Do you think we'll survive this?" Rain stared into the darkness again. "We have to," he said, "because if we don't, they'll erase us both." Sorella leaned into him. Not out of weakness, but trust, she realized then. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like royalty. She felt like a soldier beside another, and the only thing keeping them alive was each other. By morning, the creatures were gone. Only their burned remains and bloody claw marks on the trees proved the nightmare had been real. Sorella barely slept. Her eyes remained on the silent forest, her fingers still curled around the empty flare. Shell Rain had collapsed from blood loss just before dawn. Now he lay inside the survival pod, his breathing steady but shallow. Sorella had wrapped him in every blanket they had, used every medkit she could find. Still, he looked too pale, too cold. She stood over him, biting her lip. "I'm not letting you die," she whispered. "Not after all this." She knew she had to find help, but the nearest signal relay was back at the crash site nearly 3 kilometers away, past the beast-infested woods. And yet, something told her she needed to go back there, not just for a comms-link, but for answers. She reached the shipwreck by mid-morning, the forest strangely quiet. Smoke still rose from the crushed hull. The scent of metal and plasma in the air. The bodies had been removed or dragged away. Only scorch marks remained inside the remains of the command module. She found the central console. It flickered weakly, drawing power from backup cells. Sorella plugged in her command ring. The console beeped, scanning her DNA and unlocking hidden logs. One file caught her eye, Subject 07. Rain Carver Reassignment. She clicked it open. A grainy video began playing. An older Zyran general speaking into the camera. Subject 07 Earth Origin, former Ghost Corps operative. Classified as enhanced combatant, following the Earth collapse. Subject was acquired by royal contract. Under the useless species reassignment protocol. Do not inform the subject of his prior command rank. Subject must remain unaware to ensure loyalty. Sorella froze. She replayed the message, heart thudding. Do not inform the subject. She found more logs, battle reports from Rain's past. Recon missions in toxic zones, solo rescue ops in collapsing colonies. Even an infiltration mission on a rogue moon where he'd taken down an entire pirate outpost alone. He wasn't just some ex-soldier, he was a legend, and her empire had buried that truth. Worse, he didn't know. Or if he did, he never showed it. Her fingers shook as she copied the data to her wrist drive. She had to tell him. He deserved to know. Back at the camp, she rushed to the pod. Rain was still unconscious. Sweating, mumbling in his sleep, she placed her hand on his cheek. "Rain, please wake up." His eyes opened slowly, bloodshot but focused. "You're back," he whispered. "You're burning up," she said, helping him sit up. "I found something." She slid the wrist drive into a projector and played the logs. Rain watched quietly as the truth unfolded, his own name, his old missions, the betrayal when it ended. He said nothing. The silence between them grew heavy. "They used you," she said, voice shaking. "They erased your identity." "I let them," he replied coldly. "No," she said. "You didn't know." "I didn't need to," he said, staring at the ground. "I thought I lost everything already." Sorella knelt in front of him. "You didn't lose everything," she whispered. "You still have your honor, your courage, and what does that buy me?" He snapped, surprising her. "Another battlefield." Another royal who calls me a pet until I bleed for them." She looked away, ashamed. I was wrong, she admitted. So wrong, I saw you as a servant, not a person. Rain closed his eyes, breathing hard, then his voice softened. "I never cared about being praised," he said. "I just didn't want to be forgotten." Sorella reached for his hand. "Then let me remember you," she said. "The real you." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not romance. Not yet, but something stronger than duty. A bond built from fire, blood, and truth. Just then, a long beep came from the signal terminal. The emergency come beacon had finally connected. "Rescue will be here in 9 hours, she said. Rain nodded slowly. "Good," he said, "but we still have time." "For what?" she asked, confused. "For one last truth," he replied. He opened a pouch on his belt and pulled out a worn photo. It showed a younger Rain standing with a squad of humans, strong, proud, grinning. Above them, a banner read, "Ghost Corps." "We die in silence. I carry them with me," he said, "because no one else will." Sorella looked at the photo. Then at him. "You're not forgotten," she said softly. "Not anymore." The forest didn't wait for peace. By nightfall, the trees whispered, again low. Tense sounds that crawled under the skin. Rain sat, sharpening a broken combat blade. His movements slow but precise. Every twitch of his hand was filled with purpose. Even in pain, Sorella stood near the beacon light, watching the sky. They had less than 8 hours until the rescue team arrived, but both of them knew it wouldn't be that simple. Rain had said it earlier with calm certainty. "They'll come back before help arrives." "Why?" she'd asked. "Because they're not after us," he replied. "They're after the story we'll tell, now, under a moonless sky." That warning returned to her like thunder. Suddenly, the beacon flickered. Its signal dipped once. Then, again, Rain stood, eyes narrowing. "They're jamming it," he said, voice hard. "They're close." Sorella ran to the pod and grabbed 2 pulse rifles. Tossing one to Rain, "No running this time," she said. Rain nodded. "No," he agreed. "This time, we finish it." The first blast came from the east. A missile hit the ridge above them. Raining fire and dirt, 6 dark-armored attackers charged from the smoke, weapons glowing. Rain moved like lightning. He spun behind the nearest tree. Fired 2 quick bursts. 2 enemies fell without a sound. Sorella held her ground near the fire pit. Breathing fast, she aimed and fired. Hitting one in the leg, the attacker screamed. Spinning Rain finished the job. Another wave approached this. One larger, 10 or more. But now Sorella moved differently. She remembered his training, his calm in chaos, and she copied it, step by step. Rain shouted over the noise. "Draw them into the traps." She nodded and sprinted across the clearing, as expected. 2 attackers chased her. She dove behind a boulder, and they stepped right into Rain's sound mines. The blast sent them flying. Smoke filling the air again. Rain caught her hand and pulled her up. "You okay?" She nodded breathlessly. "Still here?" The fight raged on 5 minutes, 10, 20. Their ammo ran low. Their breath came heavy. But they didn't stop. They stood back to back, covering each other without words. Rain had fought 100 battles before, but never beside someone who once called him worthless. And now, he couldn't imagine surviving without her. But even warriors have limits. Rain took a hit plasma to the shoulder. He stumbled, blood soaking through his torn armor. Sorella screamed his name and rushed forward, shooting wildly. She threw herself over him as more attackers closed in. A grenade landed nearby. No time to run. Rain grabbed her and rolled over her, taking the blast with his back. The world spun white, then black, then silence. When she woke, it was still night. Fire flickered weakly beside them. Rain lay motionless, half buried in debris. His armor melted. His body still? No. She whispered, crawling to him. Please, Rain, don't do this. She pulled him out with trembling hands, checking his pulse. It was there, faint, but alive. Stars, you stubborn human, she whispered with a broken smile. Then, footsteps. More enemies, 3 of them left. Walking toward her with cold eyes and ready guns. Sorella stood, blood on her hands, tears in her eyes. But her face was no longer royal. It was that of a fighter. She raised her rifle, even as her legs shook. This ends now, she said. One of them laughed. Your protector's dead, princess. No, she replied. Steady and clear. He's still protecting me. Then she fired one shot to the leader's chest. The others hesitated, just long enough for Rain to rise. Burned, broken but alive, he lifted his rifle with one hand and finished the fight. When the last enemy fell, the night finally grew quiet again, hours later. The rescue ship descended from the clouds. Sorella waved the beacon with one hand, holding Rain up with the other. Medics rushed forward, but she didn't let go of him. Not until he was safely inside, in the ship, as medics patched his wounds. Sorella sat by his side. Why did you get up? She whispered. Rain gave her a weak smile. You needed me. She shook her head, smiling through tears. I don't need a protector anymore, she said softly. I need a partner, Rains. Hand found hers, and for the first time, he believed her. The medical ward aboard the royal cruiser was silent. Machines beeped softly. Lights blinked above Rain's bed. He lay still, eyes closed, bandages covering half his body. But his chest rose and fell, slow and steady. Sorella sat beside him. Her royal armor still scorched and stained. She hadn't left his side since they were rescued 2 days ago. Not once. Not even when the High Command demanded a report. Now, the door slid open with a soft hiss. An officer in gold entered, flanked by Zyran guards. He looked at Rain, then at Sorella. The council is waiting, he said coldly. Your testimony is overdue. Sorella stood slowly, eyes sharp. My report has already been sent, she replied. Written testimony is not enough. The officer snapped. They want a public trial, a hearing. This creature must be accounted for. Sorella stepped between him and Rain. He's not a creature, she said, voice like steel. He's a soldier, a hero, and I will not let you bury him like the last time. The officer narrowed his eyes. He's Earthborn. That makes him property under reassignment law. Not anymore. Sorella cut in. Because today, I am changing the law. 3 days later. In the Great Hall of the Zyran High Command, millions across the galaxy watched the live broadcast. Princess Sorella stood before the council, the imperial seal glowing behind her. She cleared her throat. My name is Sorella of the Zyran Crown, she began. I was raised to believe that humans were broken, a failed species, lucky to be alive under our rule. I believed that. Until one saved my life, not once, but many times, she raised her hand. And a hologram appeared beside her. Images of the crash site, the forest battle, the monsters, the last stand, and then Rain's photo from Ghost Corps. I present Rain Carver, she said. Former Ghost Corps, decorated warrior of Earth, abandoned by our empire and labeled useless. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Whispers filled the air. Sorella continued, voice rising. I called him a servant, she said. But he never served. He protected. He taught me what courage means. What sacrifice looks like. She looked directly into the camera, to every human who was forgotten. I remember you. Then she pulled a small badge from her robe, silver and black, to now create a new order. The Rain Guard, she declared, a division open to any species, especially humans who prove honor through action. The council murmured in shock. One elder stood, trembling. This is against tradition, he said. You cannot name a human to our military elite, I just did, Sorella said, and turned away. The hall exploded in noisome cheers, some outrage, but change had already begun back aboard. The ship Rain finally woke. He blinked at the ceiling, confused. Then turned slowly. Sorella sat beside him, smiling. You missed your trial, she said gently. Rain groaned. Did I lose? She chuckled. No, you won. Without lifting a weapon, he looked at her, eyes searching. What now? He asked, voice hoarse. Now, she said, taking his hand. You stand with me, as a warrior. As an equal, she said. Rain smiled weakly. That's a first, no? She said softly. That's just the beginning. Weeks passed, and across the galaxy, humans began rising again. Some were miners, others were guards. A few were broken soldiers like Rain, but one by one, they joined the Rain Guard. Not for revenge, but for something greater respect. Sorella stood at every induction ceremony, and beside her, now healed and armored again, stood Rain. He never gave speeches, never sought fame. He just stood tall, like a symbol, like a shadow, that refused to vanish on the anniversary of the crash. A statue was raised outside the Zyran capital. It showed a man standing in fire, shield raised over a princess, and beneath it, for simple words carved into the stone, useless. I think. Again. Rain read the words once, then shook his head with a small smile. I didn't need a statue, he said. Sorella smirked. It's not for you. It's for the ones watching. Rain turned to her. You really believe we can change everything? I don't know, she said, but I believe in you. And under the twin moons of Zyran, a human and an alien walk side by side, not as master and servant, not as princess and protector, but as two beings who defied the past and built something stronger than either world had ever known.